company. And essentially what's going on here is when Renaissance Bank gave the park to the city, they retained the corner lots and rezoned those commercial because the whole property originally was zoned R10 residential. And of course, like I said, they retained the two corner lots, they rezoned them commercial, and then moved forward with the, trying to sell the lots and have somebody build on that. Well, as part of the process of dealing with the mini storage application, it came to light that neither of the two lots had ever been platted. And that's an important part of our process. Our ordinance does not allow us to issue a building permit unless it's on an approved lot. And so that's the whole purpose of this subdivision application, is to go ahead and get the plats recorded, for these two lots, and so that, construction can proceed. Basically, as I mentioned, it's zoned commercial. Lot 1 consists of 3.49 acres. Lot 2 consists of 5.70 acres. Both lots are currently vacant, although it's anticipated that Lot 2 will be used for the eventual development of mini storage, recreational vehicle storage facility. Both lots have direct access to both US Highway 51 and the entrance to the city's Renaissance Park. Both lots will have access to centralized water and sanitary sewer services. Both lots are currently zoned in C4 Plan Commercial District. And as proposed, the submitted final plat meets or exceeds all of the development requirements for C4. One thing I would draw to your attention, it does not affect the approval, but just so that you're aware, both lots are constrained to a certain extent. Lot 1, which is the one on the southern corner, is constrained by the 100-year floodplain and a drainage easement dedicated to the Kane-Muscatuna Creek Drainage District along the southern property line, while Lot 2 is constrained by 2 sanitary sewer easements along the northern property line, one dedicated to the city of Hernando, the other dedicated to the DeSoto County Regional Utility Authority. All of these constraints are reflected on the proposed plat. They're shown in cross-action if you look at the plat drawing. Under the proposed motion, we need to revise the plat to reflect a 50-foot wide front yard building line along the entrance to the city's Renaissance Park, and a revised plat note number 1 to replace front yard as shown with 50 feet. Revise the plat drawing to reflect a 10-foot wide utility easement on the front and rear property lines, and a 5-foot wide utility easement on side property lines on all the lots, and revise plat note number 2 to reflect a 10-foot wide utility easement along the rear property line rather than 5 feet. And then from beginning with condition number 2, it is our standard subdivision conditions. And that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Questions or comments for Mr. Page?
I understand you said that the final plat needs to be approved before we can issue a building permit.
Yeah.
But they've already started developing on that property. So we're
Well,
going
they've done
backwards.
basic grading, they got a grading permit, but they haven't, I don't think we've issued any construction permit at this
We have not.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Page?
This doesn't change anything about the buffer zone that we voted on
No,
last time.
no. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up. That was, they appealed our denial of that buffer yard variance. It went to the board at their last meeting, and at that point, the board alderman upheld the planning commission's denial. So, this will not in any way change that requirement.
That's so just the difference, this is the plat versus that was the design
Right.
variance that they were at, right?
Yes, sir.
So this is just the easement adjustments around the property.
Yeah, and like I said, essentially, the reason, most ordinances require that any new construction be on an approved lot is basically to make sure that if there's right-of-way dedications involved, that those get done and are recorded, that there are easements, so that they get done and recorded on there. Because if we don't plat, those easements don't exist, unless it's something that the city
Setbacks.
applies, prior to. So, that's the whole purpose behind this process, in a way.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward stating your name and address?
My name's Steve Kinzer. I work with Ben Smith at IPD Solutions. Here to answer any questions. I would like to say that I believe Mr. Page did ask us to go ahead and prepare a plat, and we'll make sure that we include anything that you've said tonight that's not on there. Other than that, I'll try to answer any questions.
Questions or comments for the applicant? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone here for or against this application? Do I have a motion?
I'll motion to grant final plat approval for Renaissance two-lot commercial subdivision, 9.19 acres, 2 lots located on the northwest and southwest corners of the intersection of US Highway 51 and the entrance of city's Renaissance Park in Section 24, Township 3, South, Range 8 West, based upon a finding that the submitted plat generally conforms to the requirements of the city codes and ordinances, subject to the following conditions 1 through 9.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Brumlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Ashworth,
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen.
Aye.
Motion to approve carries. All right, Mr. Page, on other business, item number 6 is a discussion item regarding Anderson's Farms planned commercial development in unincorporated DeSoto County.
Okay. Basically, when someone seeks approval of a development that's within a mile of the city limits, typically the county planning commission will refer a copy of that application to the city for comment before they take action. In this particular case, the applicant, has requested that we kind of look at their draft plan over and give them any feedback that we have so that they can try and address those before they make their official application to the county. So basically, we're not going to take any action on this tonight. They're just looking for our feedback on the application. When they make their official application later to the County Planning Commission, then that will come back to us as the official application for an official recommendation on our part. So basically, I think at this point, they're just looking for, feedback from your review of what they've submitted so far. Corey Brady is here. He's the consultant on the application.
The only comment I guess I have is just curious about access that close to the interstate. I've just run into several projects where I've had issues with access from MDOT. Is that something that is?
Yes, sir, I can go through briefly. I don't want to be long or winded tonight going through this, but I was hoping just a conversation. My name is Corey Brady. My office is 9967 Denwood Creek Cove, Collierville, Tennessee. I appreciate you guys being here. It's been a long time since we've been down in Hernando. It's nice to be back. But as BJ mentioned, we've got a very large, great project here. We will be submitting to DeSoto County. It's 80 acres, commercial mixed use. It's in line with the I-269 corridor studies. It's in line with the comprehensive land use plans as they're published today. I understand we're working through some comp plan studies. I'd love a copy of that too. But what we're doing is, you know, these larger PUDs are somewhat, it's an entitlement procedure in a lot of ways where we have to establish codes, establish policies, establish standards that dictate the development of the property as it moves forward. It's a very lengthy, incumbent process, and it's an expensive process. So having your candid feedback today will help us mold this application to DeSoto County and then come back and make a presentation to you guys today or in the future. When we come back, we'll have a computer where we can broadcast some stuff on the screen. But essentially, we are working, it's I myself, civil engineers, economic impact companies, real estate agents, traffic engineers. We have a full team. I'm the only one here tonight. To directly answer your question, Marty Lipinski, who has a PhD in transportation engineering from the city of Memphis, who worked for University of Memphis, he's retired. He's on our team and he's studying access currently right now. He's running all the IT numbers. He's given me a cursory review of our road hierarchy. He likes it. He's studying how warrants would happen with traffic lights in the future. He is studying road widths, lane procedures, lane transitions, the whole deal. So that's going to be something that we'll have definitive answers for when we submit to DeSoto County. Now, all that being said, what we're anticipating is if you look at the land use plan, first of all, forgive me guys, you all are familiar with the property, I'm sure. It's about 3 miles east of I-55, southwest corner of Getwell Road. Miss Anderson's in the crowd tonight. If you look at the land use plan, which the world turns 90 degrees, but you'll see Getwell Road at the south of the page, north would be to the right page, is the colored plan, it says land use plan at the top of the page. There are 2 starbursts along Getwell, or 3 starbursts along Getwell Road. Those represent primary access points. And what we're looking at is MDOT already knows that there will be a signal, if 2 along this section of Getwell Road. So we're looking at the center section, the center access point, perhaps even the first access point. The first access would be TDOT driven. Oh, excuse me, MDOT driven. Tennessee's coming out of MDOT driven. But that road would be improved with additional lane, transitional lanes, all of that to get you into a restricted right and turn movement for that first access. The second access is where we believe our signalized intersection would be warranted by construction. Of course, that has to go through the warrant procedures. So that's the answer to that question. There's a bit of more information that we're working through. When the MDOT came out, or when the highway was constructed, they took a slope easement, or they took right of way. They don't do slope easements, but they took some excessive right of way, or purchased some excessive right of way from Miss Anderson. We're going to need to acquire that back. On that land use plan, it parallels a portion of Getwell Road. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a cross-hatch, yellow patch in there. We're going to have to go back, petition to reacquire that frontage. So all of that with Marty Lipinski, Dr. Lipinski, will come to light as we're discussing all this. But if you carry through, the most important thing to you guys, I think, is going to be what the plan's going to look like. And there is a master plan for the overall property if you want to jump to that. But in your booklet, I've started to provide various layers that are kind of the foundation of what this PD is going to be. There'll be a ton more information, architectural information, a lot more street section information, a lot more data prepared on this booklet. But again, we wanted to get ahead with the 30,000 foot view before we get into the minutia. So the last page is a development plan of the project, and it shows a hypothetical arrangement of how the buildings would be based on our master plan. And the methodology here is we take 80 acres, we subdivide or segregate it by areas, and within each of those areas, we designate what uses can and cannot go there, what's appropriate, what is not appropriate, and that goes back to that land use plan. But at the same time, that color-coded land use plan, you will see that it delineates different uses based on the city of Hernando zoning ordinance and DeSoto County's ordinance. The application's before DeSoto County. This is in your MAA, your municipal advisory area, but it's also within your annexation area, so I'm trying to juggle the balls here between Hernando and DeSoto County. You guys have design guidelines, DeSoto County has design guidelines. We're trying to match both of them. If one's silent, we're using the other one. If yours is silent, we're using DeSoto County's, we'll probably build upon all of them. But you'll notice in the bulk regulations and the permitted uses, we're still tying it back to your neighborhood commercial, highway commercial, residential multifamily, single family, and other uses. These are uses that are straight out of y'all's ordinance. I'd like to expand upon these and probably will, and we'll define more uses, but that is purposely done to give you some level of comfort in what it is. Y'all familiar with C1 uses versus C2 uses. But we also, you'll note if you go through those lists, there's things that I've added like assisted living, things of that nature. And those are defined, but the X's represent where they can and can't go. The X's in the permitted uses tell you where they can go. If it's blank, it's not permitted there. But the same color coding of the tabs or the columns on the permitted use chart correspond with the color of the land use plan. As you go through, of course, there's bulk regulations, setbacks, building heights, floor areas, open space requirements. All that's again tied back to your ordinance to give you some level of sense of comfort. If anything has changed, we specifically listed out the conditions of the PD that BJ's mentioned tonight on several different projects. We get into landscape provisions, we get into several other provisions. But again, at the end of the day, most importantly is the project, the general development plan that's illustrated on the last page of this preliminary document of the show. And what does it represent? Well, it represents about 170,000 square foot of retail over a phased-in period. 2 hotels are in there. We have various outlots which are included in that commercial retail space. We have some transitional mixed use. And then we have transitional residential down to residential. From a philosophical standpoint, all of the codes know that this is where the most intensive development is going to happen is at this interchange. But we have to be respectful to the existing residential areas as we transition south and on farther south. There's been some good planning. Fort Farms, I believe it is, recently went through. DeSoto County, Bob Barber put that through. There's a lot of stuff happening in this area. So we're trying to be respectful of that. So we're not taking 80 acres and putting commercial uses just, distributed across 80 acres. We're transitioning down from the most intense commercial uses, which are at the interchange, south through residential. I will say immediately we show in the transitional area on the page, it's the orange, it's the lighter orange, but it's clearly illustrated as a park. Multifamily uses. I'm not going to dance around and call it something that it's not because that's the point of being here. These are apartments. We met with Jim Flanagan, met with various other people. This is what we do for a living. This is considered by us as a transitional use, but it's a dire need in the county. Jim Flanagan, I'm sure, would provide some information that supports that. But at the end of the day, again, I talked about flexibility and distribution of uses. If the political appetite is such that multifamily apartments are not permitted here, we're allowing assisted living. We're allowing independent care. That's another use that's available. We've got an aging population. So we could very easily take that puzzle piece out, multifamily, put in assisted living facilities. I show it because I want you guys to see the cards because from a planning standpoint, apartments are what makes sense there. Now I can say there's a stigma on apartments and I understand it. We get it everywhere we go. But to construct an apartment in today's economy is about $165,000 a door. I mean, these aren't what we lived in college. I mean, these are lifestyle places to live. BJ will say, and I will say too, I've served as a director of planning for municipalities. We get all the bad sides about apartments too. We can do our best with the architecture. We can put everything the city of Hernando would require in their design guidelines to be included in these booklets. And we can make restrictions on these apartments that they have to be what they are. Again, that being said, if the apartments come out as an issue that you guys just can't get comfortable with, we can pop in the assisted living facilities as well. Transitioning from that south is single-family residential. Not duplexes, this is single-family residential houses that border a portion of Getwell and by Hellier Road. And That's the gist of the plan. We're taking the most intense uses, putting them at the interchange where they belong, and we're transitioning back down to the existing residential along the south side of the property. If we did otherwise, it wouldn't be sustainable. If we started trying to put in half-acre lots, it wouldn't be sustainable. And that's the chore we have when we're coming and introducing a major use into these areas. I want to be clear that we are doing what we can upon our given property to transition down to uses that you see or experience in the community otherwise. If the property to the west of us wanted to expand the uses, we have provisions to connect to those properties. It's limited again, it's not just carte blanche. We specifically say where these connections can go. And again, I know you guys haven't had a chance to look at it. I'm not going to sit here and go through every bit of the minutia, but we are thinking about every detail, and you'll see a very thorough application moving forward. But your feedback, at that really quick description is integral and very important. It's imperative, really, to us preparing an application. The last thing we want to do is go through the DeSoto County process and then have something pop up that we didn't foresee, which is probably unorthodox for somebody to be standing here like this, but I think it's a very valuable situation. I think it's something, at the end of the day, is better for all of us. So that being said, again, that's a real quick brush through. I can answer any question in detail, hopefully, that you have. I have preliminary economic numbers already prepared by Sharon Younger, her company, and I can tell you that based on preliminary numbers, we're already looking at this is one-time impact from construction. It's $100 million impact, economic impact, 533 jobs, $21 million in wages, $2.5 million state sales tax. State sales tax appropriated to Hernando is about $500,000. That's one time. You go into the annual, and those start extrapolating $200 million economic product annually. This is a $2 billion economic impact project, 10 years amortized. So we've got wages 10 years in excess of $580 million based on this study, 2,400 jobs, $17 million in total taxes combined with state, indirect, direct, $180 million in total taxes and a 10-year impact. So, I mean, again, we've got data. I have trip data from our engineers, preliminary trip data. We are here because we're about to get into the meat of this thing, and it gets quite expensive pretty quick. So, courtesy just to...
What's the traffic data look like? What kind of...
Well, right now, what we have is we break it down between single-family, residential, multifamily, fire station, hotel, convenience, restaurant, fast food, retail, what have you. So what's interesting, when you run these numbers, they do average daily trips, peak hour trips, and various other things. So based on the numbers, the total daily at full build-out is 11,000 trips. The 5:65 a.m., 1,000 p.m. So the numbers don't match, but that's the way their numbers do. You can't look at it and say, I said 565 a.m. trips and 1,000 p.m. trips, and then say, well, there's 11,000 daily trips, right? But that's the way everything shakes out. So the peak hour a.m. is 565 to 479. The peak hour p.m. is 1,000 to 12 and 1,013. These are preliminary numbers. They're just off the press from Marty Lipinski, so I haven't even really had a chance to analyze them, but that's based off 59 single-family residential lots, 100 apartments, a fire station, which we hadn't touched on, but your code or your comp plan recommends kind of EMS into use. We're going to subordinate land to the city of Hernando or DeSoto County, depending on how this thing's approved. We're going to give you the land, whomever it is, they can build an apartment. A fire station. 200 beds for 2 hotels, about 100 beds apiece for 2 hotels. And then it says 6,000 square foot restaurant, 6,000 square foot restaurant, 6,000 square foot fast food, and then it's 31,000 retail, and then 24,000 office is what those numbers are based off. And then again, this will be a part of the report when we submit the full document.
That 11,000 trips, is that,
That's ins, outs.
no, just let's use that number for debate, but is 11,000 added to the existing traffic that's already going through there?
So commercial captures, and that's why I want to be cautious. I want Marty Lipinski will come to speak to these things because I'll butcher it, I'll be honest with you. I don't like it. So Marty will come talk about it, but the commercial captures, residential establishments. Now, destination retail can reconfigure traffic, certainly, but I would be more comfortable Marty explaining all those things. But
That's what I'm curious, I'm just curious, how much traffic goes through that intersection now at Byhalia and Getwell? Because most of the traffic leaving Hernando get to that intersection, head north. I'll raise my hand, I take that route weekly to get out of Hernando, going that way up north, back up towards South Haven or Memphis. But, so if we already have that, I'd like to know what the numbers are, the existing traffic that we have that goes through there, and then you're adding 11,000 more trips? in
yeah,
that
that's not how it is. Marty, unfortunately, is having knee replacement surgery.
Oh, goodness.
So the numbers from MDOT I didn't get, which,
Okay.
so we can answer that. I can provide you a card and I can feed you that information as we go. It's not anything we're trying to, I just don't want to.
Sure.
That's outside of my level of expertise, which is why we hire.
Well, it's, what Mr. Skeen had mentioned earlier, that we have, what are we gonna do? You're talking about adding more traffic lights in there, or between MDOT and whoever, but Gadwell's only a 2-lane road right
It
there.
will be improved, so that's another thing we didn't mention. So it's a 106-foot right-of-way going south, south, it's a section line road. So it's an arterial classification.
Right.
It'll be improved, 106-foot right-of-way. We will improve our half of the street on Getwell and Byhalia to have the additional.
Okay.
The right-of-way is already there on it, based on the survey information, which we just have to construct the road. And that road construction would happen incrementally. As development happened, each phase, just like you build a subdivision that has frontage, incrementally that section of the road would be established, and you'd have transitional lanes. Now, if the traffic study that Marty comes back says there's need for a transitional lane or some kind of different modification, because the reality is, unfortunate for DeSoto County and the city of Hernando, is that diamond format isn't a very efficient format. It's, other municipalities, Madison.
Don't talk about our intersection.
No, it's unfortunate because this is the key area you guys identify, and the interchange really isn't the type of design of an interchange that we would like to see there.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that's what we have, and if we have to add lanes for transitional lanes, that's what.
Yeah, I guess my concern is just the existing traffic flow would be disrupted during construction. And this isn't a 4-month construction, this is gonna take a while to put together. So we've got all of that daily traffic going through there to have that through. And then if we add traffic lights, as the development matures, and we start adding traffic lights, now we're slowing that flow down.
So the traffic lights, so the streets will be designed to a level of service. And the end use of the product, the scale of the product will design that level of service, will dictate that level of service. And the traffic warrants would be determined in the study based on the distribution of uses that are there to accommodate and make it more efficient is the situation. But from a construction standpoint, again, we're at a major intersection of a federal highway and a major arterial road north and south that goes, straight through Hernando. I stopped by there on the way down and just watched. There's already a good bit of traffic there. I want to say it's like 14,000 trips or something like that.
Well, in this community, traffic is a huge pain point right now.
Yeah. And I think what's wise, and I'm assuming this is what's coming out of your comp plan, is this is identified as a node for intense commercial development. Instead of having sprawling development where you have strip center after strip center after strip center, you're focusing on major interchange. And hopefully clustering these uses to capture all of these uses and not distribute the traffic through all of the various residential subdivisions. I mean, you'll still have neighborhood commercial, but I would assume there's nodal planning in the comp plan. I don't know. BJ's laughing.
No, I was just going to say that I think also you'll see a certain amount of change in numbers now that the new Mackinville Road is open. I used to drive,
Right.
I was coming from Olive Branch, I used to get off there at Getwell and then come down Byhalia into town, because I couldn't get through on Mackinville. Now that Mackinville's open, I go there all the time now. I don't get off at Getwell, and I'm sure, I don't know that I can sit there with any authority and say how much of a change it's going to make.
Well, that's where that study would help us out.
And I think, BJ, you can say, you've known Marty, and if there's somebody to prepare a traffic study, this is the guy you want. I mean, it's a good thorough study. He's the guy you want to continue on these things. And I'll say that from your side. I mean, Marty's as good as it comes.
Yeah, that's my only comment. I think that the number of access points is a little bit excessive for that length of road and that
Let's talk
situation.
about why that is, if you have a minute, because what you see, if you look at the land use plan, or whichever plan you want to look, the color-coded plan is the easiest, the biggest land use plan. The gray dash line, the public street B and A, is a public divided road. It is established to be a collector. So instead of having multiple curb cuts along Getwell Road, they have to funnel onto the collector, and then they're directed to points of access. So the positive circulation by adding the collector road was something that Marty, out of the gate, said is 100% critical to the project. So you have a major collector in gray. In between them, you have, it's really a local or minor, it's a retail collector that transitions through the property and gets everybody into the retail area. But if you notice, and again, forgive me, I'll show it to you on the screen next time I'm here, perhaps the master plan, you can see it better. There aren't other curb cuts. There is the north curb cut collector, there's a center collector, then there is an access at the fire station, which the fire station will require, but we're also using it as our service connection to the anchor retail, and then the collector coming back to Getwell. So we have 4 points of access and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or more individual lots. So we're actually minimizing the points of cuts by doing it and forcing them to regulated traffic areas. And then on Byhalia Road, we're carrying it to the one point of access that aligns with the existing neighborhood to the south. So while I understand the concern and where you come from and the perception of that, this is actually a benefit because you'll be able to control these accesses much more efficient. And it will minimize Germantown Road. Everybody knows Germantown Road in Memphis. I mean, Wolf Chase, that's what we're trying not to have. So we're purposely funneling you to specific points of access. Again, the fire station is the only other one that is not a major point, and it's because the fire station will require it.
Was there any thought about putting a light at the corner of Byhalia and Getwell instead?
So lights are warranted by the warrant. We want to put them where we want to put them, but the warrant is going to tell us where the lights go. And that'll be based upon our transportation study, but also the MDOT's study when they're doing the warrant. So I would assume that the way I see this thing personally, if I could have it my way, I would have a transitional lane added on southbound off of the interchange coming to Getwell. That would be a restricted right into the collector. And then I would have a light at the middle entry, and then we'd have a light at Byhalia Road. That's what we would prefer. I don't want to see multiple lights. But again, having 2 lights timed appropriately is far better than not having any lights at strip retail. Goodman Road, I should have said it instead of Germantown Road.
You know, one of the things you gotta kind of keep in mind about MDOT and their regulations is that, you know, MDOT is basically, as an organization, is basically a reactive organization. They're not a preventive organization. You know, they have to wait until the numbers are there, you know, warranting the light, you know, before they'll put it up. They won't put it up in advance of the numbers.
No, I get it.
You know, because they expect it.
Kind of like schools.
Yeah, yeah.
But we'll try to design the circulation to be where we prefer. This is what we'll try to do and how we go about it. So essentially in this one, you have a frontage road scenario is what we're trying to establish. I haven't gotten into it, but even with the arrangement of the anchor retail, which, you know, it's tucked back off the way, the intent there is to not see a sea of parking as you drive up and down Getwell, to see more neighborhood scale stuff behind landscaping, behind buildings, and then you have the larger anchor tucked back away in that area. So, I mean, there's a lot of devils in these details that I didn't want to bore you with. I can talk about it all the time. I mean, typical architect, but hey, that's why I'm here. If you have a question, or if one pops in your mind later on, you're welcome to send me an email. We think we have a great plan. We checked all the boxes that we believe that we know to check based on our experience, our training, our knowledge. But at the end of the day, it's a very important project for the city of Hernando. Because once you got it out of that
I like it, I don't like the apartments. I mean,
What about infrastructure, water and sewer? Would that be
So-
tying into the city of Hernando?
So we're gonna go west, basically, where Utley's doing his deal, and then we'll go up, I guess, to McInville. And forgive me, Nick Croonin is from Civil Link, a civil engineer working on the project, and he was, he got tied down. He was supposed to provide an illustration for tonight that answer that question, but basically, we'll be pumping it west. So it's about a $500,000 fee upcharge on us to get sewer and water west of us, to tie into the system over there, where the new hotels and everything over in that area.
I would say that this will be through the city of Hernando. And the reason that I say that is because, you know, even though this is outside the city limits, you know, under the regional utility authority, the municipalities have service areas, because DeCrua can only be wholesale treatment. And so the cities have to continue to collect sewer and charge individuals with bills as a retail agent. And so, as I said, even though this property is outside the city, you know, it will go through the city system, and the city will be the billing, you know, agent, if you will, you know, for this piece of property.
You know, we actually wanted to consider pursuing annexation. The question of the city attorney is, what does that look like? And, you know, I petitioned for annexation in Hernando a long time ago, a relatively painless process, but I mean, that's a 6-month process, maybe 4 to 6 months.
It's certainly odd that it's just a little island there by itself, which, you know, that's not my
So
place to tell you that.
that's one, timing wise, you know, we just soon deal with you guys. It's gonna be your project. But I can carry it through the county with all the same protections written and replace City of Hernando with DeSoto County in the book, and still have all of the governances that we're gonna have. That's not a problem, but if it were up to us, we'd rather be building city. If we could figure out what that looks like, perhaps we can follow, I don't know, I mean, what's the timeline? So DeSoto County, we still have to prepare the documents, so we're still a few months out. Can we, I guess, any owner can petition for annexation, but there's a lot that goes along with it. Russell, you mentioned apartments.
Yeah.
I get it. I'll ask you guys, keep an open mind. We've got intense commercial uses transitioning down to established residential areas. We can't go straight from commercial uses straight to single-family residence.
You can't do office use?
What we can do, so offices, theoretically think, we have offices in extremely limited market right now. They're slim to none, okay? And there's not much market for office in the foreseeable future, but we have it in here. We have more in here than we want to have in here. What we can transition with are multifamily in either garden-style apartments, townhouse-style type stuff, assisted living, which is a commercial use, but it's still a transitional use, and duplexes. With apartments and the job market being what it is today, and where it's trending with all the data we have, there is an immediate need. And I know y'all hear this, everybody hears this. DJ's probably laughing inside for apartments, but it's factual. It is factual. I'd rather Jim Flanagan tell you or somebody that deals with them.
Is there any, when you were mentioning duplexes and townhomes, where does condos fit into that?
Well, a condominium is basically any format of attached housing, but let's say the slab is your ownership and everything else is common. So it's just another form of platting attached to residential with common areas.
Well, I mean,
also.
what I mean is, does a condo fit into transitional use?
Well, the townhouse does. The condo is a moot point because it's just a mechanism how you plat it,
Okay.
regulate it, and govern it. So what you're really getting at is attached housing, but you can go with condo converted. What we know doesn't really work right now is live work units where you expect someone to own a shop and then live above. But there are various types of residential that we can look here, but we have to be successful. It has to be sustainable. And we can entitle various uses, but if they're not functional and they're not sustainable, it'll sit there for the longest time. And again, I don't want to make this statement to you. I would rather Jim or someone else give you the data on it. But again, keep in mind, apartments that we're talking about building have gone, they were $150,000 a door 4 years ago. They're $170,000 a door. You you convert that transfer, sell it to $180,000, $200,000 a door on the open market. Rents are $2 and something cents a square foot. This is a reality. And once you get into that price structure, the buyer, the renter starts demanding more amenities, and you get nicer. That's why you're seeing nicer apartments built today. Now, I also say apartments date a community. I will say that same thing about residential. What's hot right now? Farmhouse style houses. What was hot in the 90s and early 2000s? French country, right? So everything dates the community by architecture. What you can do is hold the principles, good design guidelines, good standards, and good management.
Well, that last piece is the management
critical.
part. Right.
So is it
How
on
do,
an
how do
HOA?
we, as a city, hold the management of an apartment complex accountable?
So is the same issue with the HOA on private single family.
Can you put an HOA on an apartment?
There will be a property owners management association. There'll have to be, because there's common areas that are maintained. There would absolutely be. It'll be a problem in the PD. Just like in the commercial, there would be a property owners association that would pay into the reciprocal easement agreements for maintenances of the properties and all of that. It's a common, same basic deal. Again, I don't want to get into the weeds on it. I'm just asking each of you to keep an open mind on it because it is a transitional use, and understand that we're trying to get from a commercial down to Byhalia Road to a single family. I've already limited, it's 100 units. That's the acres. 12 units to the acre is a low density apartment development. And that's based on, DJ, your code, the RM8, there's a more intense multifamily zoning district than what we're proposing. It's on 6.
Put a lot of townhouses or garden style houses in there.
It'd be a beautiful park as well.
Parks. We do have a park on there, though.
Do we
If
have-
you'll notice that we do have a park up at the top side where the existing water's going through the property.
But that's
We've got
on the,
converted
that's a completely opposite side of the residential road. I mean,
Well, right, but when there's a
You
big
put a park.
drainage going through the north side of the property, and we have to do something with that and mitigate it through MDEQ. So what we're gonna do is, instead of putting that in a pipe running all the way through, we're gonna convert that north side to the park-like, passive park-like setting. Obviously, it's passive, but it would also serve as the detention facilities. It'd be a wet pond, not a dry pond, but it could serve the function of detention facilities for the project as well.
Well, I think one of the things that comes into play here relative to common open space is the fact that one thing I was going to mention, the document that you sent us, kind of characterizes this as a planned commercial development. And actually, it's a PUD. Because it's got both a residential and a commercial element. And under the city's regulations, and I believe the county's regulations as well, in a planned unit development, 10% has to be common open space.
We have 25.
And, but only 50% can be water.
Well, but we
So
still, we have
you don't get to count detention facilities as common open space, So I don't know if you could still achieve 25%, under those restrictions.
Well, right now, so our calculation, what we have is we have pervious and impervious areas, and we have common areas distributed throughout the project. But I do understand what you're saying about detention versus not detention. So we'll get into that minutia of what that is later. But the intent at this point is to use that area for what it was intended to do, pass the water through it. And
And I understand that, I understand the planning commission as well. The only issue I see, which Commissioner Thorne brought up, is that it's basically putting the common open space on the absolute furthest point away from where the housing is.
Yeah.
right, I understand it, but and I heed that, and I get it. That perhaps there may be a neighborhood green in the single family. We're not saying that that's not the case. I mean, this is one conceptual master plan based on this code, and that data will unwind, but that's something I'll note, common open space. With traffic, apartments, the concerns of what they are. So that's the reason we're here. I want to hear what you guys have to say. I mean, I could sit down, and talk about apartments all day long. I get it from those sides. I've been on that side and this side. Development,
That-
Mr. Brady,
that's-
what
what about cost of infrastructure improvements for, I mean, once you leave your development and you hit the city of Hernando with these, the existing facility, can it handle this flow? Or are there gonna have to be upgrades in lines, especially sewer,
Yeah,
probably
no,
more?
it's based on my conversation with Nick, everything's squared away, the capacity is there. But again, we're gonna have all of that data firmed up. Basically, what I did was I started pinning in, we put together our team, went to the engineer, and I said, this is what we have. Do we have capacity? Do we have service? Yes, okay, great, good job. Mr. Lipinski, this is what we're looking at. Does this work? Yes, great. Good job, get back with us, is what we're kind of having to work on.
Yeah, kind of same with that Byhaley Road piece you talk about afterward. I mean, I'm no traffic management person, but I'm just a regular guy that drives around. And we put the residential and all that. I know a lot of that traffic's gonna flow up to the interstate, and that's gonna attract that retail, you know, that area, the restaurants and whatnot.
Right, that helps.
But then everybody that lives there is like, oh, I gotta go shopping, so I'm gonna go back down Byhaley, back into Hernando. So we've got that traffic going back into that curvy, windy, narrow Byhaley Road, and that's adding all that traffic back and going back into the city as well.
Respectfully, when those questions arise, I look back at the regulatory documents that the city's provided and the county's provided. And again, this area was identified by all regulatory documents to have this type of use. So infrastructure would have been studied, roads, all traffic, all of that should have been considered, would have been considered when the development, when the comprehensive land use plan studies were prepared. So
No, we haven't approved it yet.
well, there are some out there.
Yeah.
Right.
We
But
we were
I-
gonna review these
the corridor
thoroughly.
study.
Okay, yeah.
So the corridor study is what we're going off of now. The Hernando study, this is Hernando incorporate, the old study incorporates this land area, but it was outside of the municipal boundary. The new study, I guess, is going to study this as an annexation area as well. The county just essentially doesn't say much with regard to it. So what we have is the I-269 corridor study, and I can tell you that what it says is to establish a town center or regional scale commercial and business district at the Getwell Road interchange within a mixed-use context that supports traditional neighborhoods, multifamily housing, and suburban areas.
Yeah, but let's think about the wording right there. That's all in support of that I-69 interchange. It's not counting about a Byhaley Road, it's been there for 40 years, and all the traffic that goes back into the city. So I'm just curious about the numbers, what it's gonna look like going both ways.
So it
not just
goes
coming
on,
up.
and it does kind of, so encourage the most intense land use near the interchange of Getwell Road and I-269 and gradually decrease the density and intensity as the development approaches river corridors and farmland. So as we go all the way south, transition. Encourage a mixed-use or master plan development centered around the Getwell Road interchange. And then when mixed-use development occurs, it should incorporate all essential public services, including but not limited to parks and recreational spaces, schools, and fire EMS stations. Those are the four, what I just read are the four criteria that it identifies for the subject property within the I-59, Hernando I-55 sector. So, and then they give all this other data. So this, from a land consulting land plan, these are our road maps. And this is what we have to work from. And we are at the corner of section line roads, a major arterial going north and a major arterial going east and west. Those are section line roads, 106-foot right of way. They were designed and the policy is set to contain the traffic. So that's the candid answer to that. Is what it is. Now, from an emotional standpoint, as development continues west, those roads will continue to be improved. And with the improvement of McInville, as you stated, more opportunities to exit and disperse traffic exist.
I think, Commissioner Thorne, you know, couple of things to keep in mind is that, you know, the comprehensive plan, whether it's the county's comprehensive plan or our comprehensive plan, does not carry the force of law. It is basically just a guide.
It should.
I know, but here's the thing, okay? You know, when you look at a comprehensive plan, you know, a lot of times you're looking at a 20-year time scale, okay? The one thing, you know, which in my opinion has always been a failing of most comprehensive plans, is that they don't really discuss, they'll talk about what the vision of development is, okay? Like in this case, that, here's an interchange, we want a commercial node there, it should have, X, Y, and Z, okay? But what it doesn't talk about is the timing of development. What if the road's not there? What if the sewer's not there? Is this the correct timing for that development? And in a sense, that is the action of the Planning Commission, whether it's the DeSoto County Planning Commission or the City Planning Commission, in assessing requests like this, and coming to some conclusion as to, is this the appropriate time for that development to occur in this location?
I think it's the right time. I do, it's just part of interpreting what all the data looks like.
Right.
Based on, dare I say, reality, not emotion, just what's the reality of living in Hernando and using these roads and coming in and out all the time? And then how do we interpret the difference? Where's that balance, that we could still develop and then still maintain a good quality of life at the same
I
time?
understood where you were coming from. I'm just candid in my response.
And I was just asking a few questions about kind of timeline, about where is this in the process with county and then with you being here. I understand it's very preliminary, and, you asked about annexation. So all that's kind of being thrown around quickly. So having a chance just to kind of take it all in and talk just briefly with BJ, it seems like that wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities to get that done possibly. That would have to be, I think, probably approved by the Board of Aldermen, and then, so I think that would be an option, and I'm not sure how far out you are with this project and when you would begin and things like that.
I'd say we're 50% complete on the documents that we just finished. So
What does that mean as far as time?
Time-wise, I think, I think everybody would love to see me submit in, it's October already, in November. I think submit to DeSoto County in November, perhaps December to tie in loose ends, just to make sure we get it right. But I think it's a November or December submission to DeSoto County. Then their procedures are a 30-day review process, and then they go to the Planning Commission, and then it would go to the Board of Supervisors for 3 readings and a resolution. So we've got, man, somebody falling apart here, dates, 6 months. That's probably accurate. I mean, the application procedure time is 90 to 120. So I'm saying 6 months, all the way through final resolutions.
6 months you're looking for approval.
That's final resolutions. We'll know at the first reading, then we'll have a second reading. BJ, that's correct, as you remember on the, do you remember off the top of your head?
Well, actually, I can't really speak to the supervisors,
Right.
but I can tell you as far as municipalities in Mississippi go, there's no state law that we have to have 3 readings.
Okay.
Most of the time, things are approved at the meeting where they come up.
I guess that'd be approved, but then you'd have to have an approval of the minutes or the technicalities. But it nevertheless, to knock off a month of that if it's not 3 readings. I still think conversationally, we're talking about 2 to 3 month submission at worst case scenario. And then however the proceedings lay out there, whether it's goes through, whether it's held. A lot of that is hoping you guys support the project when it comes back to you, because whatever we submit will come back to you guys to write an informal advisory.
I know that after an ordinance, or I guess in the case of the supervisor, an order is passed, there's like a 30-day appeal period after that occurs.
Yeah, I want to say it's a 10-day appeal period. I'll have to look back through all that. I deal with so many municipalities, I get them mixed up, and I don't know how to say that. I'll look it up and answer that question. Precisely, but, our preference would be the site we're in the city of Hernando. We just look.
It looks to be in line with the future plan that we're looking at.
I'd love to see it.
So, it would be, if this is this close to Hernando and this is going in, you have an opportunity to set the standard.
And we understand that, which is why we're here.
Mr. Brady, the only recommendation, or I guess question I have for you in regards to the traffic would be this, egress and ingress going off of Byhalia, it's directly across, according to this, from that Foxwood subdivision. I'm thinking, along with everybody else, with the amount of traffic, that's a potential hazard. Is there something you can move? Is that a
Yes.
potential to move it?
The short
up?
answer is yes. So Bob Lee, I consider a friend of mine, we did a lot of work, he lives right there. Typically, you try to align drives. You can. It helps with left turn conflicts and reduces.
Okay.
If we need to offset them, we will offset the expense that meets that criteria, whatever the engineer said it is. But from a planning standpoint, we prefer to line up drives. What I don't want to do is line up a drive looking at somebody's master bedroom.
Gotcha.
So that's from the emotional side of it.
No, understand. Thank you.
One thing I would like to suggest is, you might want to sit down and, 'cause I told you I wasn't going to do a detailed review.
I know.
You really should, I think, take a look at the matrix, the use matrix.
I agree.
I noticed that, this area F, which is the single-family residential area, the matrix shows that single-family detached housing is not permitted.
Well, that's probably an error, man. So this is a draft. What we're gonna do is put liquor stores there.
But the other thing I was gonna say.
You'll
Corey,
need it
is
after
that
it's all over
for-
this.
The one thing I didn't quite grasp was, you have, a fairly, not a real extensive list of commercial uses, but basically and I forget which area it is, I think it's area E, maybe it's the transitional.
Mixed use.
Yes, the traditional mixed use. That basically it has essentially the same list of permitted uses as areas A and B.
Somewhat, and when I mentioned earlier, I'd like to expand upon these personally, because I think the list can just be expanded upon. But I'll take that advice. They're a little bit different, and I think it goes into how it scales in. We don't, in the PD, some of these uses that would be allowed in, say, area B, I may not want to restrict them, as long as they fit the park, as long as they look the, you know what I mean? Plant stores and things like that, find out banks, drugstores. There's a new deal with pharmacies now. They're not building CVS's as much as they used to, so now you're getting them in the in-caps, retail, where individual pharmacies are doing it. So I'll look at that, and I'm happy to work with it, but I agree with you.
And I found it kind of strange that print shops,
It's over.
well, I was thinking you were probably thinking along the lines of
I
like a
took y'all's
UPS store,
list.
or
It's
a
your list.
FedEx store or something like that. But,
Everybody needs a t-shirt job.
The only place it's permitted is in the hospitality area.
This is a draft.
Okay.
So there are probably some areas that will be cleaned up, but stuff like that, print store, print shop, those don't really exist anymore. I mean, it's stuff like that. But I wanted to have a foundation that y'all are comfortable with. And if I do introduce more uses or segregate uses, I'll put them in the definitions in the file.
It would probably make more sense as a quick print store or something like that.
Well, I'm gonna highlight permitted uses, all right, and make sure that's cleaned up, so.
The only other thing I was going to mention was, this of course is a matrix. It really just shows permitted uses. And I noted that, wireless communication tower is permitted in all of the areas.
We got in trouble by restricting it.
Well,
Federal Trade came out and said you can't restrict this.
well, no,
So-
that's not what they said, but
That's what our, basically, conversation. I'll work with you on it. My goal is not
All I'm
to.
saying, Corey, is that typically, in terms of the city's ordinance, and I believe the county's ordinance, communication towers are typically a conditional use in residential zones.
Right.
I don't think there's as much concern about it being permitted in the commercial zones, but in terms of like your single-family residential area and possibly the multifamily area there, that may need to be more of a conditional use than a permitted use.
I mean, the intent is just to allow it to comply with federal. When I was at the director chair, we had Federal Trade Commission come out and almost treat it like a sexually oriented business. So you can't restrict it, you have to provide somewhere for them to do it. And when you start getting into restrictions, it causes problems. So that's what that's based on. But I can remove them from all the single-family areas and allow.
Well, you don't have to remove them. That's not what I'm saying, is that, you may need to look at the possibility of including at least a couple of things as a conditional use in order for them to really work, And the other thing I would say is what the Federal Trade Commission actually says, or I guess it's FCC really,
Yeah.
is, that you can't restrict them such that there's no options available.
Right.
So in terms of requiring, multiple locations on a single pole versus creating new poles for every company that comes down the line, is not illegal.
We can clarify that. Again, guys, the intent's not to have cell towers everywhere. I mean, that's just, and it's micro stuff.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna get into an issue with people, that's one of them, that gets them stirred up, particularly the thing that's gonna be in their backyard, so.
Yeah.
Whereas in commercial and industrial areas, there's not quite the same resistance.
I appreciate that, and I have it noted in here too, and we'll figure that thing out. I mean, how they can do it. Again, that's not our goal. There are other uses and footnotes in here where we restrict things like liquor stores and convenience stores to a certain number, not to be overrun with it and stuff like that too. So we need to refine and clarify. Is there any questions you guys had at all that I can answer? I'm sorry it takes so much of your time. I know you're looking at it contemplating.
I appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, shaping.
Great job, Corey. Good to see you, man. I
Yeah.
didn't recognize you first.
Yeah, no.
Been a while.
Yeah, good.
Hey, we both have.
Thank y'all for your
Thank
time.
you.
We look forward
Thank
to
you.
it.
Robert, he got his hand.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Chris Fuller. My wife and I came this evening not for any specific purpose, but we thought we'd be good citizens and try and educate ourselves on what was going on in the city. Boy, did we score a good one. You, as the eyes and ears of the citizens, receive information and ask for feedback that perhaps the citizens themselves would like to give feedback on. Perhaps they would like to make representation to your good selves, perhaps to their aldermen. For them to do that, my question is, the document that's being discussed tonight, is that something that is available to the public, or a form of that, or a summary of that? Because I think this is enormous. And although you in educated and privileged positions may be aware of all these developments that are going on, I think the ordinary person in the street earning a living, looking after their family is not. So I would respectfully ask, can you function as a means of informing the public about what is happening and what you have been asked to give some feedback on? Because they might like to give feedback also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are we ready to go on?
We're ready to go on.
Okay.
All right, number 7, Mr. Page, proposed amendment to the text of the City of Hernando subdivision regulations, the City of Hernando zoning ordinance, and the City of Hernando design standard ordinance concerning the provision of cluster mailboxes.
Okay, we have, reviewed this a couple of months. In September, I discussed some of the revisions that you had asked me to make. And basically, I think at this point, unless any member of the commission has a further revision or some other change that they would like to make, I think we're at a point where we can move forward with a recommendation, if that's your choice.
Any discussion, or is there a recommendation on the table?
I'll make a recommendation for approval.
Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Thorne,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Brumlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Ashworth,
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen.
Aye.
The motion passes to present this to the Board of Aldermen for approval. And last, number 8, the review of the updated comprehensive plan document.
At this stage, we're still working on the Zoom presentation. I think everybody got the thumb drives with the copies of the plan on it. I just wanted to make sure that everybody downloaded okay and that it's functioning the way you hoped it would.
Exactly the way I wanted it to. It's very- You can zoom in, it's not grainy, you can see everything.
Mr. Hawkins, did you not get one?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It was in your packet. It was in your,
Well,
the
he
bottom
picked
of
up
your.
a thumb drive and handed it to me, but one of us is missing. No, there's mine. Okay, that is yours.
Make sure I got mine.
He found it on the floor and thought it was mine. And I have one that looks just like this I use with my data collector.
So that's basically my report.
The note? I didn't see that either. It didn't look when I did this, it like that.
Yeah.
Right on with that drawer. Got a pen in there.
I can't keep up with that. We have been using them our survey crews and we can't keep up.
Is there any other discussions tonight? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a
Motion to
motion.
adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.